legendary Julia Brown. Voodoo Queen of New Orleans was known to roam in the swamps surrounding her home, as she softly whispered songs of curses. Her most famous forewarned of the ill fate of the town, promising to take them all with her in death. As they lowered her casket into the ground, a hurricane swept up from nowhere, leveling the town and 2 others close by, leaving nothing standing in its wake. Many claim the curse of Julia Brown was finally fulfilled that fateful day, and others don't dare to accuse the voodoo priestess, still fearing for their safety, as well as for their loved ones. Voodoo, a word that for hundreds of years has been associated with mysterious rituals, black magic, and ideas of the occult. The tumultuous history of voodoo practices and its evolution in places of the New World such as Haiti would push its practitioners into the dark corners, causing voodoo to become, quite possibly, the world's most misrepresented and misunderstood religions. However, even its own followers and practitioners will admit that voodoo is shrouded in mystery, its evolution over centuries producing varying offshoots of occult beliefs. Stories of dark magic, ritual sacrifice, and zombification became common associations. Although ideas of witchcraft, curses, and black magic were often established as propaganda against voodoo practitioners, real-world claims of voodoo magic for good and evil, as well as its many bizarre rituals, have yet to be fully explained. Join us tonight on Into the Portal as we discuss the origins and history of voodoo, as well as some of the bizarre claims of curses and zombification.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. I'm your host, Amber Ray.
And I am your co-host, Andrew McKay. So welcome back, everybody. Here we are, episode 7.
Woo!
That's right? We're on episode 7.
Yes.
I know how to do math.
Yes.
I do math good. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Apparently this is a breaking point for a lot of podcasts.
That's what we've read.
We're just pushing on through that.
Yeah, if you hear us past this episode, then we've done something right, I guess.
Yeah. So we're pretty pumped on this one. Yeah, we've been thinking about this for a while. Hey, Voodoo.
You've wanted to do this one for a while. I think ever since we saw...
You always say that, hey? You're always like,
this
was Amber's idea, and then we're just doing it. But
no,
anyways.
I'm super into it, too. I think it was from the Murder, She Wrote episode. And yes, we do watch Murder, She Wrote, people. There was one that was on Voodoo, and
right.
and that kind of sparked your interest in it.
Yeah.
That was a while back, but...
And I just tweeted that GIF that was from that episode.
That's right.
Hilarious.
Pretty funny.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, Voodoo. We do have a few updates just off the bat.
Yeah, quick updates.
A lot of fun stuff. Like, we switched to Audio Boom, which is really cool. So
yeah,
that's
we're
our new
loving
host. Yeah, the reception's been great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
We love the analytics. We love everything. So thank you, Audio
Yeah.
Boom. Yeah, and we've got this new merch rolling out.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm excited. I got my UFO t-shirt on the way.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, we launched...
and my pillow.
And the pillow. Amber's excited about the pillow. She loves her naps. So yeah, that's great.
Well, I need something to comfort me for all these creepy ass topics we're talking
Indeed.
about.
Very true. Yeah, no, but we had some awesome artwork done by Desdemona.
Yes.
And,
Sprinkle Face cosplay.
Yeah.
Real name is...
Melinda.
And
she does she's done artwork for Mad Scientist podcast and a whole bunch of other ones. And she did some great stuff for us. And we have it up on TeePublic. So yeah, like laptop cases, t-shirts, pillows and stuff. And it was just cool to...
The baby onesie. That was hilarious.
So anyway, you guys can go check that out.
It's a fun way to support us and just to get some cool stuff. Like,
it's fun. We've got a really cool Portal logo. Not our main logo yet, but just some other really fun ones. And that's the link's on our website, so intotheportal.com. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I don't really have any other opening thoughts, personally.
Oh, I have one.
Okay, go for it.
Happy birthday.
Oh, yeah. Happy birthday, Scott.
My brother-in-law.
That's right.
That's weird to say.
It's still weird to say that, eh?
Even though it was like October they got married.
Anyway, happy birthday, bro.
Yep.
Okay. And here we are. We're moving. Let's get going.
So yeah, we kind of covered. I was inspired by Murder, She Wrote.
Dating ourselves much. It makes us sound like we're...
She is one of my heroes. I would say Jessica Fletcher, Elaine Bennis and Velma. Velma Dinkley.
From Scooby-Doo.
Those are my trifecta of awesome females that I look up to.
That's a solid Three Musketeers of...
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
Screw Daphne, though.
Yeah.
Useless.
No. I didn't like her scarves anyway.
Same thing all the time.
So Voodoo. So we're going to talk about the origins. Basically, when we started researching for this one, we realized, like we do with a lot of these topics, like there's so much history involved. And it's not just about the myths and the legends. There's always so much more behind it, and it's tough not to go down rabbit holes, but we're going to give you... It's
fun to go down them, though.
Oh, yeah,
and to some degree.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. So to start it off, I guess, we need to talk about West Africa. We need to discuss how the transatlantic slave trade ultimately impacted the development of voodoo in the New World.
Yep.
Yes, and it's not even very clear, hey? Like, did you come up with even an approximate start point for voodoo in West Africa?
No, the thing is like, when we
neither.
were looking into it, like, yeah, it's just sort of a melting pot of different kind of... what was the word? I think it was
regional...
animism. It was sort of the religion, a lot of things based off of animals, and yeah, it was regional, so it was like all over West Africa, and then moving into Central Africa too, so there was like...
And then the natural elements as well.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, wind, water, fire, all these things.
Serpents figure prominently into that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like the python is one of the main animal kind of, associated with deities in voodoo. And so, yeah, West Africa in general is just sort of a melting pot for these beliefs, and it wasn't really... It's Vodou or Vodun is more of the West African sort of original voodoo, and then the actual voodoo developed later on in the New World is what we'll get into.
I have the spelling Vodou.
Right.
For that. And I have a couple of like different groups here, like the Bakongo, the Dahomean, and the Yoruba as like sort of the founding African influences of voodoo.
Interesting.
Especially in Haiti and Cuba, and then America eventually.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it is one of the world's most misunderstood religions, and that's sort of one of the things. It's like, even when we started looking into it, it's like, I mean, I guess I knew that, but it's like, it's a legit religion, and people don't think of it that way, right?
No.
Because of popular culture and because of everything else.
Think of magic and curses and
exactly. But,
voodoo dolls.
And there's elements of that in all religions, for sure. But, voodoo, lots of misconceptions about it, and it's basically, though, like, voodoo it's like any religion, it's for healing, it's for connecting to the spirits, all these types of things. But, of course, there's lots of occult ideas associated with that, which was what makes it so interesting, why we wanted to do the episode in the first place.
And a lot of shock factor stuff, right? Like, even in some of the documentaries that were a little bit more anthropological that we looked into, like, sometimes the images that we saw were not contextualized by, say, like, oh, this is such and such a ceremony where, oh, they're ripping apart this chicken for a certain reason, and, like, they kind of, at some points I was struggling. I was like, why are they doing that? I need to know, like, what is going on? Like,
I know, right?
And so, even back further in the day, if you were to see that as, say, like, a European colonist in the New World and your slaves are doing that, you'd be like, this is devil worship.
Yeah,
like,
you would.
You
would think that for sure. Yeah. It's just a totally different mode of thought. Like, your worldview
even just
is completely
a word,
different.
Voodoo is... It almost seems steeped in, like, this, like, dark mystery or something.
Definitely.
Voodoo.
The sound of it. Yeah.
Right?
Just the
it sounds ominous.
Definitely.
And it's funny because it actually just means spirit in the local Fon language. That's like a African dialect of sorts.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if that's Benin, because modern day Benin, the West African country of Benin, is regarded as the birthplace of this religion. Obviously, it goes through into other West African countries like Ghana and all these other places as well. But Benin is known for voodoo.
Small country, right?
It's skinny. It's very
slim. I don't even think I've
country.
heard of it until now.
No, that's weird, right? Like, I was looking at the map the other day. It is coastal, but it's like just a sliver of it is on the coast, and then it kind of like runs along the skinny border into the interior, and then it's like a little bit bigger in the interior. But interesting, right? So
crazy.
Those are the origins, though. And then we're obviously dealing with this being brought over to the New World.
Yeah.
So let's hop
So we
into that.
get things like voodoo or voodoo turning into, well, not turning into, but there's like different names, right? Like there's hoodoo, for example.
Right.
It's like, what's the difference there?
Okay, well, I got the difference between the two, but
if there is,
we even... Okay, so here's what's happened. So hoodoo is an offshoot of voodoo. And there's a whole bunch of different offshoots of voodoo. Like, we don't get into Santeria in this episode, really, but that's another example of kind of New World development of, like, an occult practice similar to voodoo and stuff. But, like, just to be clear, this all happened as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, right?
Yeah.
You know, stealing people from their homeland or purchasing them from other African tribal leaders in Africa.
Forceful migrations.
Right, bringing them over.
People.
And obviously these people are coming from all different places throughout West Africa and other places in Africa. So it's not just voodoo beliefs in general, and you got variations of it, and now they're all blending together African beliefs and also blending together of eventually European ideology in the New World.
Right. And that's interesting, too, because even today, in Haiti, for example, there continues to be sort of like, there'll be the Congo temple of voodoo, right? So it's like these regional sects haven't really sort of melded at all. Like they contain their own nuances and their own identities and stuff. So that I thought that was cool from that one documentary.
So, but anyway, the difference between hoodoo and voodoo is essentially, from what I could gather, it's actually quite interesting. I mean, hoodoo seems to have developed in Haiti, and then again, further evolution in New Orleans a little bit later on in the New World. But basically, it's like more of the applied practice, from what I can gather. The use of, I mean, there's definitely applied practice in voodoo rituals as well, like where you have obviously like objects used in ritual, and there's water, there's other things used and stuff. You're obviously like, you know, sacrificing animals or whatever. Hoodoo seems to be more of the almost like potion making, like herbalist kind of thing.
Oh, so like the gree-gree and things like that.
Yeah, very much like that.
So gree-gree, just to clarify, gree-gree is a mixture, a concoction of sorts of different herbs, medicinal, like, I don't even know what else would be in there.
It's basically it's things that not outsiders looking in would think is witchcraft and
it could
potions
be even like things like chicken bones or something.
Yeah, totally.
Or chicken feet.
There's lots of bizarre ingredients and things like that.
And they're
basically
if they're all customized, right, to the actual person that's going to the voodoo priest or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I have a little bit of a definition here, though. So hoodoo is conjure or root work, African-derived mystical, medicinal, and spiritual system of personal and psychological empowerment. So that sounds similar to a lot of religions and stuff.
Like a quest to enlightenment.
Yeah, it's that's definitely a part of voodoo and hoodoo too, right? Like about trying to connect with the spirits and all these types of things. So it continues on to say, each system involves the specialized use of botanical, zoological, and mineral material, such as herbs, roots, stones, bones, other animal parts, that are prepared in a certain ritualistic manner for the purposes of protection, defense, justice, healing, love, or wealth. So
interesting.
They're largely influenced, and this was interesting, the ones that we see today, now not at the end of the evolution, but at the current point of sort of voodoo evolution, and now there's not only European and West African beliefs and traditions, but now indigenous Native American folklore and folk occult stuff mixed into that too. So African slaves and descendants of them that ended up in New Orleans and southern United States and Louisiana, there were indigenous peoples in those areas too, and then those beliefs would, you know, over the decades blended into.
All amalgamated, eh?
So that's anyway, but that's hoodoo. So folk magic.
So we got voodoo, and then we got hoodoo that you'd find. Yeah. I also came across something called Juju.
Juju.
Spelled Juju.
Okay.
Apparently might have originated, I would say it originated from the French for Juju, which means plaything.
Okay.
Because obviously, Haiti's French colony, whatever, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's very similar, but essentially it's not actually associated with voodoo, but it's another spiritual belief system that uses amulets, charm objects, and spells. Right. And I did read into this a bit, and it almost seemed like it was like the African version of karma. So if someone gets a weird vibe from, say, even like an object or a person, they'll say that person has bad juju. Or if it could be the opposite. And another interesting thing that I came across was, so this has been used to affect outcomes of games, like things like World Cup soccer games. Really? So West African nations actually legitimately use this to try and
no doubt the Haitians as well and other people.
Yeah. So I thought that was cool. So anyway, so we've kind of gone into the nuances of names, and I guess Houdon would just be sort of like a different maybe that's just the French version. Actually.
Possibly. I mean, there's a lot of different spellings.
Because, like, obviously, anywhere in the U.S., like, we're talking about the French Quarter. Right. So this was where, after the Haitian Revolution, things like that, a lot of surviving French colonists from Haiti swarmed in and went to New Orleans and went to the French Quarter and set up a new sort of dynasty there.
That makes sense then to me.
Which does explain why voodoo was so harshly repressed in that area, just because of the consequences of the Haitian Revolution for the French.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll touch on that in just a sec.
So that's, okay, yeah, so that's a good, so we're getting back to Haiti.
Yeah.
Because this is important. So in the early days of, say, I have a date here, I have 1791 to 1804. Okay. This was basically a huge rallying point for the slaves of Haiti working on plantations, and it inspired revolts, rebellions, and resulted essentially in the creation of the first Black Republic in the New World. Yeah. Which is cool.
And voodoo was...
And bloody. It was not violent. Overnight.
No. It was...
And even then, like, we watched the documentary, and they just created their own oppressors after the French left. Yeah,
exactly.
Very sad.
Totally. Like, I have an example of that, basically. So a little bit later, so 1864 in Haiti, there was a... So now this is after the first revolution, or maybe even the second revolution. There was a couple, because there was a few leaders that came into power, and they were total dickheads, and they had to oust them, including this guy, Fabre Jaffard. So he was I can't remember the term.
Is he French?
He's French, but he was mixed race. I can't remember the term for it though.
Creole.
Creole, yeah. I was gonna say mestizo.
Or mestizo, same idea.
Different part of the world, but same idea. And he was definitely like he related to the people because he was like of African descent, but he was totally like French. He was a Frenchman, basically.
So French ideology.
He wanted to push voodoo to the fringes. He wanted to, exert Catholic control, just like the oppressors earlier on did. And so he pushed forward like high profile, like public executions of voodoo priests and stuff. So 1864 was the date for one of the most well-known ones. 10 plus people accused of cannibalism and witchcraft, and for digging up the body of a girl. They were made a spectacle of by this President Fabre Jaffard. So he basically, public hangings, and that was just one example of probably thousands of examples of people being made an to try to scare people from continuing their practices. And I find that so ironic for the creation of like myths and for all this stuff, because it's like, by forcing people into the fringes and then turning around and saying, why are you being so mysterious in the corner there? It's like, well, because you shoved us into the corner because we're not allowed to practice out in the open. Exactly. So it's just this very cyclical, ironic thing. Anyways, that was, a little tidbit from 1864. Pretty gruesome.
Yeah. Okay. So from there, I guess you see the rise, well, not the rise, but you see the spread, I guess, of voodoo. Because the story the narrative I sort of had was the idea that from Haiti, like I said earlier, the surviving colonists, some of them fled to New Orleans, and they brought with them their voodoo practicing slaves. Right. So this was kind of a point of transmission. Not to say that, obviously, the slaves that were transported straight from Africa to New Orleans would have still maintained those traditions.
Elsewhere in the U.S., right? Like, there definitely would have been,
Exactly. Not to say that voodoo was not present in New Orleans before the Haitian Revolution, but just to say that it definitely bolstered it, and and just again, like, because of the fears of what happened in Haiti, it was just severely repressed until about the 19th century with a woman named Marie Laveau. And she did a lot. We're going to get into her because we're going to talk about a few prominent voodoo leaders throughout.
Right. She was known as the Voodoo Queen, so definitely one of the more well-known.
The last couple hundred years.
Yeah, last couple weeks.
Just a couple of days.
Yeah, no, she's a really interesting one. I'm excited to get into her.
Totally.
To talk about that for sure. That's going to be fun. So where are we at here?
We're in New Orleans. We're in Cuba. Well, we didn't really mention Cuba. That was where Santeria was essentially developing.
Right. That's sort of just another offshoot of a melting pot of different kind of occult beliefs. Catholicism heavily involved in that for sure. Yeah. More so than voodoo, I would say. Santeria.
Yeah. So we kind of, like you see this blending of what you would call, it's almost like the rise of a syncretic religion of voodoo.
Right.
Because it is a blending of two religions. That's basically the definition of syncretism, eh? I actually don't know the definition, but I'm going with that.
Sounds right.
And so this included the practices and then the gods, right? So the saints and the spirits basically being melded together in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And didn't you have some notes on like the gods and stuff, or?
Yeah, so like in terms of the voodoo gods, there's a pantheon. It's not monotheistic, like Catholicism, obviously. So, but there is still sort of a hierarchy of gods, much like in like Greek or whatever mythology. So Legba is the main spirit god, sort of like the all-knowing one or whatever. And then there's lesser ones. I'm sorry, let me just find my place here. But basically it's like, yeah, so Legba would be the main one that you're sort of praying to or having a ritual focused on to try to connect to them if you're trying to like harness energy, like, oh, what am I trying to say here? The Gabo is like this like supernatural energy that you're trying to like gain by praying to Legba to use for your life, whether to like heal yourself or heal another person, these types of things. But what I found really interesting looking into the voodoo gods was like I've studied a little bit about shamanism, and it sounded really similar at first, like trying to reach out to this Legba or whichever god you're trying to reach or spirit you're trying to reach. But it's almost like a reverse. So like in shamanism, there's like a process called divination, right? And like you've heard a little bit about that, but basically same idea. You'll, take some magic mushrooms or whatever, you're dancing, you have these certain rituals, you end up in a trance, and the whole point of divination is to try to transcend, go on a journey, go somewhere else to find out information.
To leave the body
and you're gone somewhere else. Voodoo, it's the opposite. It's spirits coming into the body. Yeah. And then you're harnessing the power within oneself because the spirit world and our world are like connected.
And how it's kind of associated with like each individual has their own loi, right? Their own spirit, guardian god thing.
Right.
That can take over their body. Like if they are a voodoo priest practitioner. Yeah. Or like a bokor.
Exactly. So it's similar, but it's almost like a reverse.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So we're just like jumping right into the whole concept. We're jumping like all over the place.
A little bit.
The reason, obviously, for this rise of syncretism in voodoo is because, like we touched on, the colonial oppression, the idea that these slaves were not allowed to practice their own religion by any means. It was oppression through conversion. Yeah. And how they were forced to kneel in front of these Christian idols. Yeah. And so that's where you get these... Yeah, the mixing, you get St. Patrick, and he becomes... Who does he become? St. Patrick becomes Dumbala, the Snakewa. Okay. And for example, St. Peter is now Papa Legba, the gatekeeper of the spirit world. So that's cool how they were able to mix in their own spirits with the religious iconography of Christianity.
That is really fascinating, right? If you think about it, because it's not like this happened overnight. No. So it's like...
There were laws passed,
It's just to think about, like, there's so much mystery, right? So it's like, slaves come over, they're baptized, like they're Catholic when they get there, right? It's like your religion is stolen away, you're not allowed to do it anymore. But then they're off in these dark corners, still practicing voodoo, and then being forced to, like you said, kneel in front of Catholic saints. Just the ideas of like, over decades and over this time, like what occult beliefs from each side are really being melded together, you know what I mean? It's so cool. It's like, it's freaky. It reminds me of like the movie The Witch, even though that was like just straight witchcraft. It makes me think about that kind of thing.
Like Christian Puritanism.
Because there's so much pain, there's so much anger. Like, this is where the development of ideas of voodoo as like curses and negative associations with it because this is where things like that were becoming a real thing. It wasn't a part of the actual religion, but they were blending with these things, and
totally the darker elements. And you're right, that's a really good thing to emphasize is the pain and the suffering that these people are enduring. Like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even imagine. Like, we saw images of the chains that they were forced to wear, and like those And those aren't nice, pretty stainless steel, like, you know, like it cut into you. A lot of people developed wounds, sores that they ultimately succumbed to because of the way that they were.
Just because of the chains.
Yes, yeah. and not even the labor, but even that was obviously
so you no doubt. I mean, I can only empathize or try to imagine it to a certain extent, right? But you'd think that obviously, like if I was in that position, I would definitely be trying to concoct ways of either defending myself or seeking revenge, so to speak, I guess might be the...
Well, but even not so much framing it as revenge, but almost just righting the imbalance of injustice or evil.
And that's a big part of voodoo.
Exactly. The duality of good and evil and the balances of the spirits. A lot of the times, things that look like, say, if they're using a ritual object and they're sort of like projecting that they're not actually cursing someone, they're trying to correct the imbalance is kind of how I would frame it.
Right. And that's where we'll see and in trying to correct those imbalances and having like these offshoots like hoodoo, like and things like that, where you're maybe trying to accomplish these things, we see all these like similar motifs like from Catholicism and with this synchronicity, right? So like the color red, the use of blood, ideas of sin and sacrifice and reaching out to spirits to help you for these things, right? These are all similarities with Catholicism and other religions
that have gone
as
through
well.
repression and
right. Anyway.
Okay.
Where are we?
Oh my gosh. Well, we're just getting way into the whole the idea of repression, and there, like I mentioned, there was laws that were enacted and declared. Like there was one in 1685, so this is quite an early one. So basically this law just declared all African religions illegal on American plantations and required all masters to Christianize their slaves within 8 days of arrival in Haiti. Yeah. So things like that, where it's just standardized conversion and just forced.
Yeah. Dicks.
Yeah. I'm not really a huge fan, but
no.
And then we did kind of mention the idea that like when you see a voodoo ritual going on today, you'll often see saints, you'll see the Virgin Mary, you'll see crucifixes being used, you'll see elements of baptism also prevalent, like purifying through water, blood, earth, different minerals, like on the hair, on the scalp, and face and everything, and it's all very like in paralleling.
Yeah, totally.
Paralleling.
I feel like we're struggling a little bit today with our vocabulary. I'm like reaching for words and like the words like super simple, and I'm just like, well,
it's like
can't remember.
I feel like the other day when I was struggling to find that stupid word, and I feel like I just said it right now. Projecting.
Is that what the word you were trying to remember?
I was trying to say like, when you're really angry. I don't know. That doesn't make sense actually. Never mind. Sorry, guys.
I digress. We digress.
But we are struggling, so I think it's time for a quick break.
Okay, all right.
Because we have an awesome promo from another podcast that we're big fans of, Secret Transmission, hosted by Toby. He's got a few other co-hosts with him.
Yeah, it's an awesome show.
And he basically, he covers a lot of the same subjects as us.
Yeah, very similar interests as us, and we're digging on that. So here's a little clip from Secret Transmission.
Testing. Can anyone hear me? My name is Toby, and I'm the host of the Secret Transmission podcast. We are a show that discusses the paranormal, conspiracies, the supernatural, UFOs, cryptozoology, and anything else weird. Our show is transmitted to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitter for updates at Secret Transpod. So get ready to put on your tinfoil hats and come learn with us as we try to explain the unexplainable.
And we're back.
Indeed.
So we left off just before the short break there talking about the synchronicity, the synchronisms, the similarities, the blending, if you will. Another interesting point there, just before we do move on, that I thought was kind of funny. I think we mentioned it briefly earlier, but like St. John's Eve, like, have you heard of this?
No.
So it's a thing, like, and we, everyone's heard of like St. John for the most part, or whatever, like St. John the Baptist, if you're religious or
I think
whatever.
Of the plant.
Yeah, and also, St. John's wort, which is like a medicinal herb.
You know what's funny? The city of Kelowna classifies that as a noxious weed.
I know.
It's not just a weed, it's a noxious weed.
Which is crazy, because it's legitimately used for all kinds of different medicinal practices. It reduces inflammation, and then it's used in rituals too, but it's become a big part of voodoo. And so St. John's Eve is like this big deal in New Orleans, where they do all these types of like voodoo baptisms on like the banks of like certain sections of the river and stuff. And Marie Laveau was known for doing these baptisms on St. John's Eve, and people would always be trying to sneak down to the water's edge to like catch a glimpse of these ceremonies, because they were so mysterious. And
really?
Yeah, so Marie Laveau was a big part of that. But St. John's Eve and St. John's wort, named after him, was incorporated into the pantheon of magical plants in voodoo, basically. That's
interesting. So you might find that in your gris-gris. Go down to
it was actually
the French Quarter.
It was even hung over doors in the French Quarter to repel witches and evil spirits, and it was used in antiquity as well for people to fend off like medieval witches as well. So knights used it, carried it around, things like that. St. John's wort. Cool. Who knew? So many uses.
So that would have originated then in Europe and then been sort of like
that's another
transmitted
example.
in
Sort of transplanted.
Because I don't know if St. John's wort is ever in Africa. I don't think that's an African plant.
No, that has to be another
European.
Yeah, European, and then I wonder where it originated as a plant. If it's North American or European.
Well, if it was in Europe in the Middle Ages, then it had to be in Europe.
I guess if there could be two different species of it, there must be two different.
That's very true.
Anyway,
cool.
Interesting. But
let's look into it. No, okay. So then we get into
we're botanists all of a sudden, just out of nowhere. Like, you guys are listening to a botany podcast, so.
So I think another we need to talk about we did talk about the blending of the two religions, but then there's also the element of the blending of the occult of the African and European origins, and then the ritual objects associated with those two.
Right.
Because I feel like that's where a lot of the misconceptions arise from what we think when we, today, say, if you're like, oh, voodoo, yeah, that's voodoo dolls and, burning wax effigies and cursing people that way and, that type of thing.
Yeah, no, that's what you typically would think of, right? Well, there was just recently a Disney movie that...
Crystal balls, fortune readings,
Wasn't there a new Disney movie there where, voodoo was incorporated into it?
Oh, yeah, The Princess and the Frog, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
They used a voodoo doll.
Crystal balls, and there's the voodoo doll in that. And
I've never actually watched it, but...
I just saw the trailer for it, but it's all there. All the stereotypes are there.
Yeah, the crystal doll, that is not voodoo.
No.
Tarot cards are not voodoo.
No, so tarot cards, the dolls, the crystal ball, and a whole bunch of other stuff originated way back. Jinx.
I found a really cool article from a girl. Her name is Natalie Armitage.
Okay.
I keep wanting to say Armitage.
Armitage.
She's probably American.
Probably.
But she ended up co-editing an anthology. It was called The Materiality of Magic. So it's an artifactual investigation into ritual practices. And she wrote her own article in that anthology called European and African Figural Ritual Magic, The Beginnings of the Voodoo Doll Myth.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, oh my god, it's a gold mine. Yes.
Interesting.
When I first came across this.
Indeed.
So she kind of explores the history of the use of effigies. So these are ritual objects.
Okay.
Also referred to as voodoo dolls, and she explores the use of these in Europe and then deconstructs the notion that voodoo dolls had a prominent place in West African traditional voodoo.
Okay.
But instead, the idea comes from the misinforming ways it's been used and appropriated in pop culture in the 19th and 20th century, that type of thing. So
where does this start then? Where's your jumping off point here in ancient history? We always get into ancient history on this show.
Okay. Something we did not know, and you, listening, probably didn't either. All right. In reality, the first ever, the earliest recorded history, where there's evidence of sympathetic magical rituals. So sympathetic meaning like produces like. So image-based. So if you have an image that looks like someone, you can kind of parallel the two of them.
The voodoo doll, obviously.
Exactly. So, this originated in Greco-Roman period. So, things like 2nd century millennia Assyrian and Ptolemaic Egypt. practiced image-based sympathetic magic rituals.
That's way back.
Yes, so these rituals involved a representation of the enemy person or deity. And I'm actually going to say it's more like the enemy people, because a lot of times this was directed at whole cities that, like, say, another city was sieging or something.
Okay.
Like, so
not just individualized.
Exactly. And, so the doll object is then subjected to mutilation through burning, binding, inserting of nails and other objects. So that is... Yeah, so it's basically used in a ritualistic fashion for protection for either the king and his peoples or whoever's involved in this.
Right.
And there's, it's very prominent. So basically I got examples from Egypt, where there's the example of... the destruction, burning, and burial of wax effigies, so wax objects, inscribed with names, and these were often inscribed in Greek, to protect the king and country in temple rituals. So another example I have here, this comes from Iraq, circa 934 to 610 BC.
Okay.
In Neo-Assyrian culture, there was found clay figures buried underneath the floors of houses in order to ward off evil and disease. So very similar, right?
Yeah.
To the ideas of voodoo, where magic is practiced to ward off disease, to ward off evil, not to incite it.
Not for vengeance or anything like that.
Yeah, so I thought that was very interesting. And this was just, this was the mainstream. This was kosher. This was what everyone accepted in antiquity. Like, there was much less of a separation of the human earthly realm and the spiritual realm, and it was so much more accessible, and people just, it was just more condoned, I guess.
Yeah. The only example that I came across where it suggested that, like, a random sort of offshoot of that idea, like it wasn't for vengeance or anything like that, was, I don't know if this is true, I can't even find the source, we'll definitely list it online, I have it in here, but it was a source saying that Ramses III of Egypt, there was evidence that there were dolls directed at him, like there was that there were dolls that were mutilated, that were found, that were directed towards the king. And I don't know how popular Ramses III was, but Ramses II was super popular because he fended off the Sea Peoples during the end of the Bronze Age, and then Ramses III comes in later on. This is after the Sea Peoples incursion, and I don't know how popular he was. Clearly, if that story is true, not that popular. But.
No. Interesting.
Yeah.
So they didn't actually know who had made them or anything.
No.
It was just there. Where were they found, do you know?
I think they was found, like, not in his tomb or anything like that, but just in sort of a nearby ruin or something like that. Like, from poor people that were trying to wish him ill will, basically.
Oh.
Lower level priests.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not commoners, because I feel like that definitely would have been practiced by
I don't think it would have been even preserved from commoners. Right. It wouldn't have been in the,
I wonder in which way they were mutilated.
I wonder. But anyway,
I don't know why I'm thinking of the Sphinx with the nose taken off now. I'm like, I wonder if they would do.
Hey, yeah, I wonder, right?
There's some theories
that was like the only example. I pulled up another one, but it was from like Live Science, totally not peer reviewed, anything like that. And there was speculation that an ancient Greek like inscription that kind of looked like a Medusa, depicted like a Greek goddess that wasn't not Medusa, but with like snakes coming out of her head. And then some people interpreted this as somebody trying to like draw a curse, basically. Black magic, indications of ancient black magic, but much like a lot of these things, it's like ancient aliens where they like look at a hieroglyph and they're like, that's a UFO. It's like, well, yeah, you can say that. Anybody can say. I could say it's a pizza. You know what I mean? It's like kind of just however you want to interpret it. So, but
so another point to make here while we're talking about antiquity is the emphasis on the image. So all these wax figures either were inscribed with indications of who it was supposed to be, or they were made to look like that. The image was important, which is a contrast to voodoo, and we'll explore that in a second. Yeah. So I have one more example.
Go for it.
From Byzantine culture.
Okay.
And I have a dramatic quote. The use of figurative magic in antiquity also took the form of love spells. In Byzantine tradition, these involved charms with wax figures laid in a bowl of blood. Rituals performed with the wax likeness of the subject before it is stuck with a knife while conjuring demons, or names inscribed with a needle onto a wax figure. The names of the demons invoked were then written onto a piece of paper and inserted into the spine of the doll. A needle stuck into the heart of the image, likening this to the love that must pierce the woman's heart. Again, the piercing of the figure is seen as a means of fixing or binding the demon that is being conjured to the object, rather than attempting to influence a sympathetic effect on a human or celestial victim. End quote. So that was from Natalie Armitage's article, but she actually got that information from a guy named Greenfeld. He wrote his piece in 1988, and we will be including that in our references.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I just thought that was interesting because you do get elements of blood.
Right.
So more, I don't want to say primitive, but yeah, more visceral forms of rituals.
Yes.
And
yes,
yeah, just the wax likeness, isn't that all those things, right? The sticking of the needles into the wax figure, the piece of paper inserted into the spine of the doll, all of this is conjuring up what I always think of when I think back to Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island.
Oh my
yes,
God.
Sorry.
I did not think that's what I didn't think that's what you were going to say there at all. I was like waiting for something so profound and then Scooby-Doo Zombie Island.
That was my favorite Scooby-Doo movie.
Oh my God.
But it was fun because that was like an interesting form of like early like a blend of witchcraft and Christianity too, right? Because they were pioneers living on the plantation, and then they were raided by pirates in Scooby-Doo. And this like has a lot of history involved in it, and like it was Bayou Island. They got a bunch of catfish out there. And anyways, sorry if I'm offending anyone with my bad accent. But anyways, yeah.
She's not an actress.
No. But they used wax dolls to control the gang in the end. Like, remember, it was the two evil people ended up being the girl and her mistress, and they turned into like these cat creatures that were like, they were immortal, and anyways,
maybe
I'm getting off on
a couple of kids later and watch it again because I'm not really remembering that. But,
it's so fun. Love it. Anyways.
That's funny.
But yeah, I know definitely lots of zombies in that one, so check it out if you're interested in Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
All the young ones out there. Get them into their Ogopogo onesie. Watching some Scooby-Doo.
That's right.
So, yeah, we already mentioned that it obviously has a lot of Greek influence in antiquity.
Yeah, like you mentioned how, like, and I always mispronounce it, but like Ptolemaic Egypt. Right?
I always just try and gloss over it.
I don't know.
Ptolemaic.
But that was obviously like Greek. Yeah, like you said, it was inscribed in Greek. Mm-hmm. So obviously Egypt went through so many stages of like Persian, Greek, controlled by a lot of different people. Assyrian. But it was called did you already say the Greek Colossi? Mm-mm. Is that correct? Greek sympathetic magic. Yeah, anyway, that's, I guess, yeah, the Colossi, basically just like black magic.
That was the term for it.
Yeah, the ideas of witchcraft in ancient Greece, and there's inscriptions about it, like 200 BC, so this is a few hundred years after Herodotus and stuff. A few Greek peeps talking about it. The burning of wax dolls and such. Interesting. A lot of it had to do with love.
Yeah.
Getting lovers back, gaining love, like success with love.
Sorry, are we still talking ancient Egypt?
Ancient Greece.
Ancient Greece.
So the same idea, because it was Greek Egypt. Yeah.
I feel like what we again have to emphasize is like that a lot of these practices of antiquity were meant to bind like spiritual entities into like certain areas or to certain people or whatever, and they weren't often used in nefarious ways. It wasn't like a lot of like tit for tat, like vengeance and you stole my chicken, therefore I'm gonna put a curse on you or whatever, that type of thing. But then when we get into the medieval era, that's where we start to see more of that,
right?
And it starts to get darker and darker and more taboo.
Yeah, and no pun intended, because it's sort of like the Dark Ages, a lot of like the Middle Ages. But yeah, it was a dark time for a lot of peoples. so to speak. So I'll jump into a little bit of the European witchcraft info.
Sweet.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Cool. Because obviously, like we touched on before, Catholicism blending with West African beliefs, and there's all kinds of these occult traditions melding and evolving over time.
Yeah.
And elements of witchcraft was a huge part of that. Because obviously witchcraft and Catholicism and Christianity are super, super closely related, because obviously you're burning witches because you're afraid of their threat to your... Yeah, exactly, right? So European witchcraft, basically, we're looking at, we've got around 500 years AD, so about half a millennium after the birth of Christ is when sort of old pagan ritual was starting to kind of blend and cross over into the monotheism of like Christianity, basically. And yeah, that's it. And it was all cool. It was cool at first. Like pagan stuff was okay. Like, and we still practice pagan stuff today because
like
we have Christmas trees are pagan.
Really?
Yeah, that was a pagan belief. Like, put up a tree and
they're like, it's okay as long as you put Jesus on top, or an angel, or
then it's fine. But it wasn't. Yeah, so the 7th to 9th centuries AD are when the church starts to sort of influence laws to try to create anti-witchcraft laws, this kind of stuff. But the whole point of this is obviously witchcraft and pagan rituals, much like voodoo, were getting shunned away. And not only were people just getting labeled as witches and burnt at the stake just at random, but the people who were legit practicing like root work or like herbal medicine or these types of sort of like very benign occult beliefs were pushed to the fringes, just like voodoo. And this is all European origin. What happens? European peoples go over, steal a bunch of Africans, take them as slaves, and now you've got occult beliefs that people were afraid of from Europe blending with the same sort of ideas in
so traditional fears related to witchcraft and heresy in Europe become displaced, and they become focused in the New World on the new other of voodoo.
Right.
The unknown.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And that's so we see this evidence of this in all kinds of stuff with voodoo practices, like not just because they're not the same now as they were when you look at West Africa way back, but like things like salt, like the use of like black salt or sea salt in rituals. Like, so salt in witchcraft is can ward off spirits, right? And same sort of thing used in voodoo, used in all kinds of different rituals. Usually black salt is the main one.
Black salt?
Yeah.
I never heard of that.
I don't even know how you get that, but it's a thing.
Diet?
So salt is said to absorb energy. It can be sprinkled around an area to absorb negative energy, swept up and discarded. A ritual bath with salt and water or salt applied directly to skin will, ward off negative spirits.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think we noticed that when we watched that documentary with sort of some of the modern day voodoo stuff, like in some of the mixtures that they're pouring over the head and things like that.
Yeah.
But also just in things like sacrifice, so the use of blood.
Yeah.
That's definitely associated with witchcraft. What else have we got here? Obviously good and evil. So ideas of the devil, heaven and hell.
Kind of the idea of, well, no, I'm not going to... Never mind.
Oh, and most importantly,
yeah.
I mean, we're touching on this in a second too, like a little more so. But the like we were just talking about voodoo dolls for however long, and the poppet, the poppet, and I was like, when I read that, what did you think of right away when I told you that word?
Poppet, Pirates of the Caribbean.
Pirates of the Caribbean, right?
Yeah.
And they bust in the door and it's like, hello, poppet. And I had I thought he was just saying like puppet or something, like just like trying to be creepy, cutesy, the line in the movie. But
so wait a second, what is the definition of a poppet?
So a poppet, this is another thing that's like led to the voodoo doll thing. Poppets are essentially voodoo dolls. They are they can be made of wax, they can be made of twigs, they can be made of string. It's basically anything, but they're made in the likeness of, like you said, like what was that word you used? Like it's made in likeness of something else.
Of the subject.
These ones are like legit voodoo dolls. Like in the sense that we think of it in popular culture.
They are meant to transmit pain,
yes.
Curses.
Yes.
That's cool. Well, not cool. I wouldn't want that. But that's interesting, because now we actually do get a legitimate voodoo doll.
Yeah.
In witchcraft, in Europe, in the Middle Ages.
Yes.
Nothing to do with Africa, voodoo,
no.
anything.
No. Mm-hmm. The only similarities there is, like, you're using some of the stuff that you might find in hoodoo, like, to go along with the poppet, right? So you're gathering up bones. You're gathering up these similar elements to be used in the ritual. So those are the similarities.
And then oftentimes that would include hair, nails, any sort of thing that they could get from the victim, a piece of cloth.
Which is the creepiest one to me for some reason.
How would you get a tooth from someone if they're still alive?
I mean, this is the Middle Ages. People's teeth are falling out willy-nilly. You don't have a nice dental plan, I guess. I don't know.
No, you punched him last weekend. You picked up his teeth off the ground, and then now you're still mad. So you're like, no, I'm piercing you.
No, I just remember reading that in one of the recipes for something, and it was like teeth. For some reason, to me, that just sounds so much more gruesome than bones. I don't know why. Teeth. Like, 'cause it's just like, you gotta get them out of there. It's just like...
But a tooth is a bone.
I know, but it just sounds so, like, painful and gruesome.
Well, how the heck would you get a bone? You have to chop off a finger. You have to boil off all the stuff. And...
I feel like bone implies that what you're using is already dead, though, and teeth is, like, ambiguous.
But then why are you cursing something that's already dead?
Well, maybe you're cursing the family. Maybe you're just trying to do whatever.
Or you're cursing them in the afterlife. I wonder if that was quite a common thing. I don't know. Anyway. But, okay, one thing that I think is interesting, too, as we move into this medieval era is the binding, the emphasis on binding that I mentioned in antiquity, right? So, like, the idea that you're binding stuff to the effigy object, like, most often it would be spirit, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But the binding becomes something much more nefarious in the Middle Ages. It becomes more so an invocation of demons sent to curse the victim. So, like we're saying, right? Like, and then that would be transcribed through the ritual object, through the effigy. What did you call it? The poppet. Poppet. And then with the intention of inflicting harm on an individual.
Right.
Much more prevalent in the medieval era.
Yeah.
And that's why people started to get really freaking scared of witchcraft. They did not like it. I have an example here from Scotland. This was 1968.
Yep. 1968?
Oh, 968.
Okay.
Sorry. 1968. It was just 50 years ago. Oh, exactly 50 years ago it would have been. Anyways, but not actually. It's 1,050 years ago.
Okay.
So there was a King Duff of Scotland.
King Duff.
Yep.
What a
Duff
name.
King.
Drinking beer.
Yep. So he found himself threatened by witches. Apparently they were trying to cook his wax, a figure that resembled him, over a fire. And he started to, the story goes, this is a very vague story, it's just a little snippet. Yeah. But the story goes that the king was said to sweat when the wax doll was positioned over the fire by the witches.
Wow.
And then, the same story goes on to say that, or not the same story, but the same article went on to say that essentially, there was rulers, say, like Charlemagne, that was, like, pre-France Gaul.
Yep. He
passed several edicts on this issue. He banned it and its practices. He totally fearful, like, and that's where you get, the rise. And that's interesting to me. That's really early.
Yeah.
This is the 900s.
Yeah, that's super, super
And
early.
then, like, when I think of witch hunts and things like that, I think of, like, 1600s onward.
Yeah. I mean, you think of Salem and you think of New World witch trials for us. I mean, being in North America, obviously, I mean, what were some of the more prominent? I mean, there was lots. There was prominent witch trials all over. There was a bunch of inquisitions, right? The Spanish Inquisition, the whatever Inquisition, all these. Mm-hmm. You could get, So,
I guess at this time, medieval era, so magic is just more and more synonymous with Satanism and taboo.
Yes. Right.
So, inescapable, it's just bad news bears.
Bad news bears.
Bad news bears.
Stay away.
I can't, every time I say taboo, I just think of Tom Hardy.
I know, he's so sexy.
We're both just like gawking over him, hey?
Tom Hardy, that's the one actor that I will gawk over a little bit. He's great.
Andrew's not gay, but he's gay for Tom Hardy.
I am. He's the best. I love that guy. And Taboo is such a fun show.
It's really fun. I really hope
elements of black magic, elements of this kind of stuff. Yes, for sure. Voodoo, definitely.
And then in that one, they also combine North American, like, elements of magic and witchcraft, that type of thing. I thought that was really cool. So, we've kind of covered a lot. Do you have any more notes on the whole?
No, I think we're moving on. The most
of...
profound thing for me there was the poppet. Just how voodoo dolls are not from that at all, and it originates in witchcraft, and it's just so cool. Like,
mind blown.
And they're way creepier too. Like we'll put up an image of a poppet, but it reminded me of like Slender Man.
Ooh.
Or something. It's not like a voodoo doll, like when you'd see it where it's more of like a doll. Like they're creepy too. But these ones that I saw were like twig.
So they're more natural.
Almost like Blair Witch Project kind of style looking. Creepy twig figure things.
Yeah. Or I'm thinking like Black Hole, that graphic novel where there's like all the stick figures and and actual dolls that are in the woods and stuff. Do you remember that? That's a
I never
freaking
finished that book, but it's a cool book. We should put that on the bookstore.
I think it was supposed to be an analogy for the rise of AIDS in Seattle in the 80s.
Right.
But
we should have a comic section of the bookstore.
Oh, we're putting that up in the More Awesome Book section.
Cool.
We have to fight over if it's going under my section or your section, though.
Well, you've actually read it, so it should probably go under your section.
Okay, let's do that. Great book,
but
though.
we're moving into the real fears and claims of voodoo, hoodoo, and the offshoots. So we're talking zombification, black magic.
I do have some notes, though, on the Kendoki.
You do?
And some other stuff before we dive into that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm jumping the gun. Go for it. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to gain a sense of what the African version of this would be, right? Like African magic. Right. African magic, a lot more benign, not seen as nefarious, not seen as conducive to Satanism or taboo, that type of thing.
No.
So that's just, something that we definitely need to hammer on.
And just to be clear, too, the idea of magic has a certain connotation these days. When, I should have touched on this looking at the witchcraft stuff, magic was used by the church. Like, people in the church would practice magic, would do magic, until it became taboo and associated with witchcraft. Then magic's not cool anymore.
No.
But when you talk about African magic, it's like, that's just religion. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So there definitely was less of a sense of separation between the spiritual, the magic, the even science, right? Like we had references to physics and how matter and energy can never be destroyed nor created. It can only be transformed, which is a powerful source of spiritualism in voodoo.
Yeah.
So anyways, I do have some notes here. I just represent the Kendoki. So this was a term I came across. It basically is it can be an ability harnessed by an individual, the ability to use unusual powers. So like magic, things like it can be both positive and negative. Okay. Can be attributed to sorcery or witchcraft. So sorcery would be more like the medicinal, the herbal, the elements.
Like hoodoo maybe kind of stuff.
Yes, exactly. And then witchcraft is more like the incantations, the rituals, the ceremony, that type of thing.
Okay.
So essentially to heal in voodoo culture, so this is their use of magic or kendoki is to heal or to ward off or correct the spirit. So again, we're just kind of harping on the same things we said before. Yeah. But I think the main point here is the effigy object used in Western African magic that could have been mistaken for a voodoo doll. And in Bakongo, so that was one of the founding African tribes, they have this thing, it's called the Nikisi Nkondo. And so that is a fetish object.
Okay.
And I'm saying fetish object referring to the idea that it's a talisman, a charm, or a magical object, not a fetish as in like...
Again, a negative connotation today, but does not mean the same thing.
Yes.
It was just an actual focus, not a negative obsession.
Exactly. And so like the Nikisi Nkondo can take many forms, and unlike that of Europe, it does not have to be image-based, so it can be much more abstract.
Okay.
And the main emphasis is placed on the arrangement of the ingredients that gives life to the Nikisi, which is the spirit that is summoned within the effigy object.
Okay.
And so there were definitely foreigners that went into these villages and things, and they would see these objects, and they would see things like nails driven into them, and it would look very similar to what they saw in Europe with like needles through wax dolls and that type of thing. So this is a total misconception, the idea that these were used to create harm or transmit harm in some way. But instead, like these nails definitely, they represented a type of connection between the spirit and earthly realms.
Interesting.
So it could even be representative of a binding pact between parties. What they would do is each member of the party would lick the nail, and then they would drive it in together, and it would connect them all and sort of to the pact. And then as well, it could be, again, a way to sort of a catharsis of sorts to correct, say, the imbalance again of negative energies, that type of thing. So it could even be like, say, if a village member is having his chicken stolen or something, or maybe coyotes are carrying them off, something, that type of thing, and there's this imbalance, he might go to the voodoo doctor, voodoo practitioner, and
to correct that.
Yes, and do this sort of ritual to sort of... So anyways, I just wanted to say that basically the main functions of this Nikisi, the spirit within the Nakondo, was to protect the bearer and mostly for the prevention of illness, was not for spite, personal gain, or revenge, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. We just keep harping on that, but I think we need to. Just, like, you know, we're tackling the myth conception. Yeah,
so. And I mean, this episode really has, like, we're going to get into some cool, like, mythology stuff in a sec, but, like, it's been a history episode, and this podcast is history, myths, and legends, and there's definitely a lot of myth and legend with this stuff, but yeah, I mean... There's just such rich history to it. We can't just cover
European witchcraft and then not cover the African side of it too. So. Anyways, but going into, again, what you wanted to furtively dive into, the real fears of voodoo practitioners. Yes. So this is kind of the more ominous side of voodoo that is definitely legitimate in the eyes of practicing voodooers. Oh my gosh, what do you call them?
Just voodoo, voodoo priests, voodoo practitioners.
But I feel like there must be, because, like, I wouldn't call myself, I'm not religious, but if I say I was a practicing Christian, I wouldn't call myself a priest. You know, so
right, you would just be a Christian.
Or I guess you're just a person that subscribes to voodoo.
Yeah. So, but there's some real stories that are quite out there.
Freaky.
Do you want to kick off with the zombification?
Sure. Because I came across a cool-ass article that was, not cool, but I was just like, what is this? When I came across it.
Okay, let's dive into it.
So we're going to get into the whole black magic, which was performed by Bokor. So this was like the sorcerer. So there was the more benevolent priestesses, and then there's these Bokors. And I believe that Bokor actually means to do with both hands. With other... rituals, the priest would only use his right hand, but the Bokor uses both, which has different connotations. Okay. And so essentially the fear of becoming a zombie, zombification, is a real fear in voodoo.
In general, I don't want to become a zombie.
In general, but obviously we don't really have this in Christianity, that type of thing, right? Like,
no, but I mean, I just mean the idea of
becoming a zombie.
Yeah.
The Walking Dead.
But it's not like that, though.
No.
It's a different kind of zombie.
Yes.
And actually, we found that out watching it in pop culture. Yes. Like, which is kind of funny. We learned that. Actually, I'll touch on that in a sec. You go for it.
Okay, so basically, the zombie is defined as a soulless body that can become a slave to the Bokor, the person that basically places the person into a zombie-like state of mind. Mm-hmm. So... so the zombie powder. So this is what induces the person into this state. And what happens is essentially they are mistaken for dead, they are buried, and then they are unburied by the Bokor and taken as a slave. And essentially they have some sort of antidote to the poison, the zombie powder, which the main active ingredient is tetrodotoxin, which we'll get into because that is kind of contested. Like the actual, can you actually make someone a zombie out of this stuff?
Can you dilute it enough to actually make it work?
Yeah. And there's definitely a lot of scientific nuances that are interesting. But, so this is how the story goes. The Bokor unearths this person, gives them the antidote, gives them another sort of poison or a toxic plant called the Denatura plant. So that kind of is sort of like, I wonder if it's the combination of the two different chemical properties of the plant, that sort of induce the zombie-like state where they basically just have no free will. Right. So there's little mindless zombies. Laborers. Yeah. And there's this Daily Mail article I came across from 2015, and it discusses the story. It's a famous story. The guy, a Haitian man named Clairvius Narcisse, he was pronounced dead in 1962, and he was resurrected by a witch doctor and enslaved for 20 years, supposedly, on a sugar plantation before returning to his family and village. Yeah. This is crazy. So essentially, this was written about in this book called The Serpent and the Rainbow by a Harvard scientist named Wade Davis. He was an ethnobotanist. Okay. And he learned about this zombie powder, and he was just like, this is crazy, I need to go and figure out, like, is this actually true? Is this a myth? What is going on? And he ended up developing a relationship with this voodoo king, Max Boisvert, who we're going to touch on in our later section. So essentially this guy is the godfather of voodoo, and he gave Davis this recipe for zombie powder. And so the ingredients...
Let's hear it. Your little squeaky laugh.
Just a little squeaky laugh. So apparently Davis discovered that the potion was made from the crushed skull of deceased baby, freshly killed blue lizards, a dead toad wrapped in a dry sea worm, and an itching pea, an exotic type of vine. And then it says here, this is part of a quote, but the powder's most noxious ingredient came from the poisonous pufferfish, whose liver and reproductive organs contain tetrodotoxin, a powerful nerve poison 1,000 times more toxic than deadly cyanide.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So the question is whether or not you can come up with a combination that isn't going to kill someone, that's going to just keep them alive.
Yeah.
But if this could have been something that, I mean, if it's something that could have been figured out, hundreds of years ago, then yeah, no doubt that a lot of these myths and fear of voodoo became a real thing.
Are based in the real. And there are people that definitely call out Davis for his research methodology. He actually commissioned a grave robbing of a recently deceased baby. Right. So that definitely did not fly with a lot of people. And
usually digging up babies less than ideal for PR purposes. Yeah.
And there was a guy, I found this other article, it was kind of like a follow-up, and this was by a guy named Terrence Hines, and he was ruthless. He was just saying that, all of Davis's research was just kind of throw it out the window because he went in without a skeptical frame of mind.
Yeah, I read that too.
And he was basically duped by these people and all this stuff. And he actually made a good point. Okay. And I'm not a scientist. I don't know if there's a scientist and can maybe help clarify this or say whether or not I'm right or wrong.
We should reach out to Mad Scientist Pod.
I know. Oh man, Chris, where are you?
Yeah.
But anyways, so this guy made the argument that if you put these people under tetrodotoxin poisoning, essentially what happens to them is you get flaccid paralysis. Flaccid paralysis.
That's not a word you want to hear very often.
No. Flaccid paralysis.
Okay.
And that just means that everything goes limp. Everything,
right.
It's like the opposite of going stiff, right? Some people think of the mindless zombie, as
being or almost like a Frankenstein kind of.
Right, yeah, a little bit. But his argument was that this would be impossible. These people would not be fit for labor,
working,
right? They would just be... They'd be
useless.
Paralyzed. Yeah. But I don't know if he was actually taking into account the combination of the Denatura plant and the supposed antidote that they instilled after they unburied them.
Well, here's the thing. Mm-hmm. What is the significance not just of the ingredients themselves, but the way in which they're combined and the other sort of bizarre ingredients that are used? What
about the power of words? What if the incantation?
Well, that too. Yeah, the actual... the energy, the non-empirical things that can go into it. We talked about this in the homunculus episode too. Yeah. What is the significance of some of these ingredients that seem just completely random or whatever, but obviously has a purpose? I mean, alchemy is a little different, but this is sort of elements of alchemy. I mean, this is alchemy, is it not? It's
for sure
taking a bunch of random stuff and trying to make crazy concoctions and stuff out of it. I mean, that's pretty.
I'm not trying to create gold or anything, but
no, but alchemy wasn't just about creating gold.
No, definitely not.
This is a definitely more occult version of that.
So that was kind of where I got to with that. I definitely thought that Davis had he was an interesting reference. This is one of the first references I came across during my research. So just his connection to Max Boisvert was definitely interesting because Max Boisvert is highly regarded. He is...
Jump into it. Let's do it. Voodoo king, no?
He is a voodoo king. Recently deceased. I think it was back in 2015.
Oh, really? That's very recent.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But, okay, so we're going to dive into leaders. And... yeah, I had a little bit on Marie Laveau, but we can touch on her after if you want.
Well, we might as well lead in with Marie Laveau because she kind
of brought it into the mainstream.
Yeah, let's kick off with Marie Laveau.
Yeah, and just for chronological sake.
Sure.
It's just my OCD.
Yeah, big time.
Anyways.
So Marie Laveau was known as the voodoo queen of New Orleans.
Yeah.
She was a priestess. She was
a priestess. She was born a free Creole woman in 1801.
Okay.
And she died in the same house she was born into.
Wow.
She always lived a modest lifestyle, which was very interesting.
I read that she was a hairdresser.
Yeah.
By trade, so to speak, but that was just a cover.
Well, she definitely needed to provide for herself because she married at a very young age. She married at the age of 18 to a man, and they had two kids, and both of those kids died, and the man died. So she was a widow by the age of 20.
Wow.
So she needed to provide for herself, and so that's how she kind of got into the French Quarter elite, was through hairdressing.
Okay.
And whenever I think of Marie Laveau, I kind of feel like she's the Robin Hood of voodoo. Like, she was always trying to help those that were underprivileged, those that were condemned. Like, she would see people that were about to be executed, that type of thing, and give them their peace and whatever. And so she was always offering her services. But yeah, she had an early family, ended in tragedy. She had about 15 children over the course of her life. Only one survived to adulthood.
Crazy.
So some people try to frame that as like a dark, like, what was she doing with these babies?
She was like sacrificing her own children. Right? Yeah, no.
Anyways, I wouldn't say that. But the hairdressing part is cool because it gave her a privileged position, and it gave her a lot of access to much of the town gossip, rumors, the elite, like I mentioned. And so she had a lot of power of information in what she possessed, and she also created supposedly a network of informants. So this would aid her claims to psychic powers and to her voodoo prowess, that type of thing. And apparently she exacted quite a bit of influence over the city.
Crazy.
This is actually kind of hilarious. I have a quote here.
Okay.
Of Laveau's magical career, there is little that can be substantiated, including whether she had a snake named Zombie after an African god, whether the occult part of her magic mixed with Catholic saints and African spirits, or whether her divinations were supported by a network of informants she developed while working as a hairdresser in prominent white households and in a brothel she ran. She appeared to excel at obtaining inside information on her wealthy patrons by instilling fear in their servants whom she either paid or cured of mysterious ailments. It has been said that the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans had the power to put a person into or out of City Hall. She nurtured the sick through multiple epidemics, stood on the gallows ministering to the condemned, and was accused of causing the deaths through voodoo of both a lieutenant governor and a governor. Many condemned her as a witch, while others praised her as a saint. End quote.
Very cool.
Yeah, that was from strangehistory.org. But this is a very colorful woman.
Yeah.
Very, people had mixed ideas about her. Some people definitely, like the quote said, like, they feared her, and other people just venerated her and just totally respected her because she ended up living to quite an old age.
Yeah.
She was...
The interesting thing about her, too, is because obviously, this is becoming, not main, she made it more mainstream, but, right? She's hobnobbing with more of the elites of New Orleans and of the area, but when she's going to do, like, these voodoo baptisms on St. John's Eve and things like that, it's not as if it's like, come one, come all to the voodoo church where everyone's welcome or whatever, right? It's still super mysterious, super, super secretive, and that's why there was positive associations with Marie Laveau, and obviously all those negative associations persisted. It wasn't just because of racism or whatever. It was because all these practices stayed super secretive. Another thing, I don't think I mentioned it at all earlier, but another reason why people feared this and why people thought voodoo was so secretive, it was because they were doing these things and rituals in strange places and on the bayou or whatever, but also because it was oral tradition. Not a lot of this stuff was passed down, like, written in a book. There's not like there's like a Bible of voodoo, right?
No.
There's individualized spell books and different texts and stuff like that, and all of this was oral tradition, and it's evolving over the centuries and stuff. So it's like you can't really go pick up any one reference book of voodoo to be like, oh yeah, this happened in this date, and now this has changed into this. That's another reason why it's so mysterious. It's just constantly evolving because it's all oral.
Yeah. And yeah, so she took leaps and strides and definitely helped to bring some power back to the powerless that, like, of the voodoo practitioners and stuff.
Yeah.
And again, like, we see this with Max Bouvard, the godfather of voodoo.
Yeah.
So this guy wasn't in the French Quarter, he was in Haiti. And he was also the person that reportedly gave Davis the recipe for the zombie powder. And at the time of his death, at the age of 79, he was the head of over 6,000 hungans, or voodoo priests / doctors. So again, like, shedding taboos, right? Like, he was responsible for a lot of that. He was responsible for the organization of these hogans because they were so marginalized by the Haitian elite. They were essentially just living in extreme poverty. Yeah, it was not a good time.
No. And
he ended up getting the call from his grandfather. He was actually living in New York when I think he was about 18 or 20 or something, and he was studying biochemistry in the City College of New York.
Really?
And his father, on his deathbed, ordained him to carry on the tradition.
Wow.
So he was basically like, oh, okay, this is not something that you say no to.
Yeah.
And I'm going to accept this, and I'm going to do it. And I have a quote here from him, just a quick one.
Yeah.
He says, quote, "My position as supreme chief in voodoo was born out of controversy. Today, voodooists are at the bottom of society. They are virtually all illiterate. They are poor. They are hungry. You have people who are eating mud, and I don't mean that as a figure of speech," end quote. So that kind of points to the, the conditions, and it's very sad. Obviously, Haiti is still enduring a lot of hardship and struggle.
Indeed.
Yeah. But he definitely a very pivotal figure, and
it's good to see. Like, it's cool to kind of like end off like with some positivity. A little bit, like not.
Like positivity, as in like he was bringing recognition. He wanted to shed the taboo. Like I know, like, even the fact that those documentaries you saw are around is basically because of him, right? And like how if you allow the mainstream in to view, maybe there will be some misconceptions that'll arise. Like, see, even what I said, right, where I'm like, they didn't actually explain that one frame where they're like ripping apart chicken. I don't know what's going on. What is going on?
Yeah.
I want to know. And but that's just, this is the start.
Yes. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. I mean, how do you want to wrap this up here? I guess we're coming down to the end.
We kind of are.
I think, like, I do want to get your take on the zombification, like, because I didn't really get your opinion on that when we transitioned into talking about the leaders. When we were looking into Marie Laveau and Beauvoir, there wasn't a ton of, like, I mean, there was definitely claims that they were practicing black magic, that Laveau practiced black magic, that there was...
And to this day, people say that she haunts the graveyard where she was buried, and that she will... you can see her ghost wandering around, cursing and, creating Santeria curses for people that are disrespecting graves or, like, that type of thing. Really? Yeah.
Spooky.
Yeah.
I really want to go to New Orleans after researching for this.
I know, right?
And, like, actually, we kind of picked this up listening to Graveyard Tales, because they did an episode on voodoo, and I can't remember which one of the two, Matt or whoever, said that they had been there, but that the Marie Laveau voodoo store is like a total tourist trap. And then there's actual voodoo shops elsewhere in the French Quarter. But obviously Marie Laveau, she's right there in the public consciousness, revered / also controversial figure in history.
Yes. Like a lot of women are, though, right?
Yeah,
powerful
very much
women.
So.
Yeah.
Definitely. Ultimately, do you believe in black magic, and what's your take on zombification?
I believe in the power of belief. Okay. I believe that people can be induced to states where things that may not be possible in other contexts can become possible. Right. And journeys, spiritual or metaphysical or whatever, can occur. Yeah. I believe that, I believe in beliefs. I believe that zombification is possible. Yeah. I don't know if I really maybe that whole 20-year stint on a sugar plantation, like, holy moly, like, was he really that out of it and drugged? That to me speaks to the need for a documentary to go in and see if this is really happening everywhere. Like,
it would be like, you'd think, like, pretty, like, tough to make this stuff and then, like, force your basically you'd be microdosing your slaves over 20 years to, like, keep them zombified.
Like, this Denatura plant is quite toxic, and from what I read, it can produce quite violent results in some individuals. So I'm wondering if the tetrodotoxine would be a calming agent, that type of thing, so you wouldn't get that sort of violent. Yeah. Because people in the US get poisoned by this plant, and they are hospitalized, and you're basically incapacitated for close to 48 hours, is what I read, and you can die. Yeah. So, and psychosis is a part of it. Basically, it kind of induces a dream-like state. So you don't know what's real, you don't know what's not. Yeah. So...
I mean, I do believe that there's, like, obviously there had to have been, like, occult practices and knowledge that people knew the exact right combination to make this happen. Because there had to have been an origin for these stories, and people do claim, like, this guy, that he was, stories like that, gone for 18, 20 years or whatever it was.
And just because some Harvard scientists got a hold of some of these samples and proved conclusively, big old air quotes, that there was not enough tetrodotoxine to actually affect, or, like, that doesn't mean that it's not a real thing.
No, he may have even acquired a bad batch or bad sample.
No, the batch that he actually acquired was from Davis, because he did the grave robbing. He actually assembled all the ingredients himself, which to me, that's not very legit. No. You're a Harvard-based ethnobotanist. You're not a voodoo practitioner. No, you don't really know what you're doing.
Going in and getting the right people to actually...
And he did. He was with Max Bovar, and he was with this other dude, but, like...
That's the risk with things like that, though. You want certain results, you're going to kind of guide it towards that, though. That's the issue with a lot of that type of research. You already have the
intent. Yeah. So again, power of the mind. Right. You're trying to make it happen.
Yeah, that's sort of one angle of power of the mind. I do believe in black magic. Mm-hmm. When it's kind of funny, like, researching all this voodoo stuff, and then...
Well, part of black magic, though. Like...
Well, this is just it. Looking into voodoo, and then looking into European witchcraft and its association with voodoo eventually, like, in terms of crossing over beliefs. And European witchcraft is way more freaky to me. It's, like, way more scary. The puppets are super freaky. Like, that's, like,
the
straight
intent
up,
is
like...
scary.
Yeah, like... cauldron, boiling babies, I'm gonna, like, set a curse on you type stuff, which we don't find as much in voodoo. No. So I definitely believe that, like you said, power of the mind and power of certain combinations, and then crossing over with voodoo, there's real energies that can be harnessed here.
Another irony, hey, the idea that the fear of the other actually resides in the fear of the self, right? Yeah. With these European colonists, they were really just fearing their own culture.
Pretty much.
they were projecting it onto the other, the voodoo,
pretty much,
and all that.
Super ironic. It really is. I mean, think about it being like, you can't do that. It's too weird. Like, and you know what though? Like, at the same time, like we said this earlier, if you're a European and you witness some of these rituals, right? There's just like in a shamanistic divination all over the world or whatever. It's like you're thrashing around. There's frothing at the mouth. You're dressed in crazy different garb and things like that.
There's manic trance states, like chanting, the drums, all of it, right? It just all adds to this fervor and
and it is out there.
Oh yeah,
like it is out there, and so it's not even really like racist to think back. Way back in the day, if someone was looking at that, they'd be like, "I'd be afraid if it was like 17 whatever," and you happen to witness something like that.
Especially if you saw something like that happening, and then you saw a rebellion and a revolt happened right after.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what the Haitian, colonists described it as. They had made a pact with the devil. Yeah, yeah. And that was what was happening.
Yeah, and there's still some, like, super religious kind of dickheads today that still harp on that, being like, Haiti still is in such rough shape because they made a pact with the devil all those centuries ago and practicing voodoo. But... maybe
they were just SOL. I don't know.
No. Anyway, so there's episode 7. The myth conceptions of voodoo.
Yes. We're unmasking all the mysteries. Yeah. And we hope you enjoyed it. Yeah. If you have any questions, comments, helpful criticisms.
No, all of it. It's all good. Reach out to us at intotheportalmailbox@gmail.com. Yes. And you can hit us up on Facebook or Twitter or whatever.
Insta.
Yeah.
We'll always have updates. We are going to be updating, of course, the bookstore.
Yeah.
Got some cool books on voodoo and black magic.
Yeah, this is kind of the most stacked.
Kind of is.
One of the most stacked.
It's gonna be hard to
books.
choose. Hey,
yeah.
Like I haven't actually finalized that yet.
I know, right? Yeah.
And then as well, the blog post. That's gonna be up tomorrow. I still have to finalize that as well.
That's okay.
And as well, look forward to the show notes being available on the resources page on our website.
Yeah.
Go check out our website though, because I added some content to the front page.
Yes.
And it is cool.
Yeah, there's way more stuff going on there now. Definitely worth checking out.
Yes.
And we do have like a mailing list now too. So if you guys are interested in like, getting a heads up on when new episodes are going to come out, or bonus material or contests, things like that, like we're in the process of getting some stickers and some other swag and things like that we'll definitely be doing in contests. Then go on our website and sign up for the newsletter. And as usual, if you're digging the show, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to Into the Portal.
Subscribe.
And check us out on Audio Boom. Yeah, new platform. We're absolutely loving it. It's awesome. And
it's a game changer.
It really is. And then lastly, don't forget to check out Secret Transmission Podcast, our featured promotion today. Yeah, and I think that's it. Do you have anything else to add, Amber?
Let me think about that for a second. I think we're good. Yeah, I think that's basically that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening, you guys, and we will be back again next week on Into the Portal. Stay tuned.
All right. Until next time.